Ma'am, what are you looking for? May I help you?
I am looking for pictures of poor India, hungry India.
Arre, madam, gone are those days. Now it's populated India, but powerful India. Hey folks, CA Rachana Ranade here, and I welcome you all to a very interesting and informative video. Why is this so different from other videos? Because till date we have talked a lot about how to analyze a specific company. We have done that using fundamental analysis. But till date we have not focused really on two aspects. Number one, whether the economy is doing better as compared to the past or not, and number two, whether the people in our country are doing better as compared to, let us say, 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Which parameter could we be talking about? I hope you have guessed it right. The parameter that we are going to try and understand today is GDP, that is nothing but the gross domestic product. Before we move on to a lot of aspects about GDP, let me quickly give a big thank you to these two people for their wonderful comments. Their names are Aishwarya and Rutvik. Rutvik, you are in Dhule and I understood your comment. Maybe the viewers won't understand it, but thanks a lot for that. Well, let's start with the very basic question as to what is GDP. GDP is a market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country's borders in a specific time period. Mathematically, it is represented as y is equal to c plus I plus g plus x minus m, and I'm sure that you have understood nothing. Don't worry, we'll try and dissect it and we'll go through it one by one. But before I take few examples, first we should understand the mathematical formula again. What is C? C is basically consumption. Okay. How do I give examples of consumption and all that? We are going to do that immediately, right? What is I? I is investment. G is government spending. X is exports and M is imports. Okay, you can write it down if you want, but we are going to take examples of each and everything. One more important point in the definition was that it is the market value of all the finished goods and services. It's not about raw materials, it's not about intermediate products, it's about what? Finished goods and services. Keeping this important point in mind, let's take few examples for this. First, let's understand examples of C, that is consumption. Assume that we are talking about a case where there is a grocer, and that's you. You go to the grocer shop to buy sugar. Will that be like a finished product being sold to this person? Yes. Will this transaction be counted in GDP? Answer is yes. Okay. But let's take example of a case where we have a sugar ka factory outlet. Here we have a baker who is going to use it in the manufacture or in making of cakes. And finally, you are going to be buying cakes from this bakery shop. Which transaction will be counted in GDP? The first one or the second one? Ideally, it will be the second one because this was like an intermediate product or a raw product, and this transaction will be counted as a finished product. I hope this point is clear. Let me give you another example. Assume you go to a bakery and you buy eggs. Will that be counted in the transaction for GDP? Yes, obviously, because again, finished goods and services. But again, same, let's continue with the same old example. Here you have a poultry outlet, factory outlet, something like that. Again, a baker. Now he's going to use this eggs as a raw material to sell it to a final consumer. Will this transaction be included in GDP or this one? And answer is this one, because this one talks about selling finished goods or services. I hope it is clear till now.
No, wait. I have one doubt.
Doubt? Arre, today editing team, animation team has doubts. क्या बात है? Tell me.
If I am a home baker, I buy eggs from a local store. I make cakes and sell it on order basis.
Okay.
Won't this be counted twice in the GDP?
क्या बात है? पढ़ेगा इंडिया तो बढ़ेगा इंडिया. So she is saying that she is a home baker, and assume that she went to the same bakery shop. She bought the eggs from there, but now she is taking certain orders from her friends and she's selling it to the end consumer then. Will this be counted twice in GDP? Answer is no, because typically recording the transactions from the unorganized sector is very tricky. Okay. Ideally, she'll not be uploading the records on any website. She'll be doing cash transactions. I know that for sure. Okay. So this data won't reach to the government, and then this transaction being calculated in GDP is a little bit tricky. So it will ideally not be double counted. We are going to talk about the same point later, and that time you will tell me, we have already covered this. I hope the C is very clear, which is about consumption. Okay. Whatever we have discussed, both these examples that we discussed right now were about products. What could be an example of a service? A doctor is giving services to a patient, that can be a service. A barber giving services to a customer, that can also be a service. This will again be under the C, that is consumption. Second one is I, and I is about what? Investments. So let's take an example. Company is spending money or I should say companies investing money in various fixed assets. Will that be counted under I? Obviously, yes. Second example can be a case where there is a foreign investment where they are pumping in money in our country and we are finally using it as an investment to maybe just to procure plant and machinery, or maybe to build another factory to increase the capacity. That will also be counted under I, that is investment. G stands for government spending. So, for example, government spends on healthcare, government spends on education. These numbers will also be counted in the GDP of a country. Okay, and finally, X minus M. That's simple. How much I exported minus how much I imported. I means as a country, right? That totality will be counted under GDP. One interesting data point that I would want to everyone to see on this specific article is that YouTube has given up this article which says that YouTube contributed 10,000 crore to India's GDP. So that's a big number, and that is how we can say we YouTubers are also exporting our services to YouTube because that's registered in USA, and we are helping to build forex reserves for our country as well, right? Before I wrap up this section of what is GDP, let me quickly give you a quiz. You have to tell me in the comment section. I'm going to paste the same question in the pinned comment. You have to give me answers to this question in the pinned comment. Assume that China produces mobiles and they export it to India. Okay, will this be counted as a plus for China's GDP or for India's GDP? That is question number 1. Second question is that China comes to India, they set up a manufacturing plant in India and goods are produced inside India. Will this be counted in GDP of our country or not? I want you all to answer in the pinned comments, and I will give my answer at the same place. There are a lot of people who feel that GDP is a very complex concept, but I hope I have made it very simple for you. And many people feel that there is also one more very complex thing. To smash the like button. It's very simple. Just smash it and then keep on watching the video till the end. Well, now let's move on to some other important point as to what is not counted in GDP. Till now we talked about what is counted in GDP. What could not be counted in GDP? Number 1, it could be charity services. Number 2, it could be reselling of a house. Okay, because if we are talking about primary sale is counted, and if I again consider resale, it will be double counting. So reselling is not counted. Third will be like love and affection towards our kids. That's not a monetary transaction. How can a non-monetary transaction be counted in GDP, right? And the fourth one could be GDP from informal sector. The one example that my team asked, this is the point. GDP for informal sector will not be counted while calculating GDP. Now she's saying, kalla. Okay. Now let's move on to one or two more questions. You might have heard this in the news that ABC or some country is the fastest growing economy. You might have also heard in the news that this country is a very rich country. Based on what? So let me give you quick examples for this. Assume that there are only two countries in the world for simplicity of understanding, country A and country B. Assume that country A is growing at the rate of 10%, whereas country B is growing at the rate of 5%. It is growing means what? Their GDP is growing at 10% and 5%. And as I said, there are only two countries, assumption. So can I say that A is the fastest growing economy in the world? Answer is yes. Okay. Of course, one more example wherein I said, how will you understand that a country is very rich? For that, again, let's take an example. Assume that country A has a GDP of 100 whatever billion dollars or whatever, and country B has a GDP of 200. In this case, what can I say? I can say that country B is the richest country, again assuming that there are only two countries in the world. Okay, I hope these basic points are very clear and simple. One more thing to understand is that you have to, whenever GDP is compared, current year versus previous year, generally this data is published on a quarterly basis. And this quarter's data will be ideally compared with the previous quarter's data. So for example, if I'm talking about India financial year from April to March, April to June this year will be compared with April to June of previous year. So we take this as a YOY basis. So assume previous Q1 GDP was 100, whatever, rupees in whatever. And this year's GDP is 105. What can I say? GDP has grown at 5%. Okay. One last point before I wrap up this segment. Generally, GDP is calculated using expenditure method, or there is another method known as production method. There is an income approach, multiple things, but the most widely used is expenditure method or expenditure approach, and that is what we are using in this video. Let's move to few more important points. The very first one is, who does the calculation of such big numbers? The answer is very simple. It is computed by Central Statistics Office, or the CSO. This will come under the Government of India's Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, that is MOSPI. If you have heard about this, the website is www.mospi.gov.in. Now we have to also understand that if they are doing this amazing calculation, won't they be presenting it in a specific manner? Answer is yes. So for that, let's have a look at this chart. Now, if you see, oh my god, I'm sure you might be like, array, this is so complex. But I'll quickly help you dissect this. On the left hand side top, you can see GDP for 2022-23, and on the right side, what can you see? It's the same thing. But then there is a difference. On the left hand side, you can see it is at 2011-12 prices, and right hand side you can see it is GDP at current prices. I'm sure you might be like, ye achanak se where did 2011-12 come into place? What is this current price? And for that, we have to understand two more concepts. Well, the two concepts that I talked about right now, the first one is nominal GDP and the second one is real GDP. Instead of me talking about the definitions of these two, let me give you a simple example. Assume that I am a sandwich seller and I sold sandwiches worth rupees 1000 in the previous year, and this year I sold sandwiches worth rupees 1100. Okay. Was there a rise in India's GDP because of me? Answer is yes, agreed. But this 10% rise, do you think the quantity of sandwiches that I sold, did that change, or was it only because of the price change because of the inflation? Now I'm giving you additional data point that this rise from 1000 to 1100, I had sold the same quantity. The difference is that because of inflation, I increased the prices of sandwiches, and that is the reason why it went up to 1100. So what do you think? If I'm talking about nominal GDP, am I also considering inflation in this? Yes. If you want to know the real GDP, you'll have to remove the impact of inflation so that you'll be able to understand what is the true GDP. We call it as GDP at constant prices. So what you'll have to do, you'll have to first calculate the nominal GDP, and from nominal GDP, you will have to deflate the amount using what? Using the weighted average of CPI and WPI. What is this? CPI is consumer price index and WPI is wholesale price index. In simple words, you calculate nominal GDP, and from nominal GDP, you take out inflation. What you derive is the real GDP. I hope this point is clear. Now, where did we see these figures? And what was that 2011-12 in the chart? Basically, 2011-12 is the base year that we as India take for the purposes of computation of inflation for the GDP purposes. So again, let's go back to the chart. Now I want you all to focus on the 2020-23 FAE column. FAE is the first advance estimate. Okay, and in row number 13 of the first table. Now here you will see that the GDP first advance estimate for 2022-23 is 1 crore 57 lakh 60,363 crores, because if you look at the top of the table, it is rupees in crores. Whereas same thing if I look at the right hand side chart, again serial number 13, 2022-23 advance estimate, first advance estimate, that is 2 crore 73 lakh 7,751, again rupees in crores. Now both these figure 1.57 crore versus 2.73 crores. Both are what? Both are advanced estimate of the GDP of 22-23. But why is this so different? Because the right hand side talks about nominal GDP, whereas the left hand side table talks about the real GDP. Well, I hope the table is absolutely clear, but I would want to take you back to where we started. And if you remember at the very beginning of the video, I told you that in today's video, we are going to answer two questions specifically. The very first one was whether our economy is doing good or not. And for that, how can we check? We have to calculate GDP, wherein, now not calculate, we just have to read the data points which are there in the table. And now you know that you should not just focus on the nominal GDP, but you should focus on real GDP, and you can compare that current year as compared to the previous year. If it is better than that, yes, our economy is doing better as compared to the previous year. But then there was one more question that I said that we are going to discuss in today's video, was that are people better off today or not? Are people better off today as compared to the previous year, or maybe 2 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, or whatnot? And for that, we have to understand one more concept, which is called as GDP per capita. Because right now we talked about taking off the inflation impact, but what about population? Our denominator is also changing. So for that, this GDP per capita is really important, and for that, let me take you back to the table. So now on the left hand side table, if you see, per capita GDP, 26th item. Here you will see that this year's 2022-23 first advance estimate is at 1,13,967. Or this is not rupees in crores, okay? This is just absolute number of 1,13,967. If you compare that with previous year, it was 1,07,670. And if you compare that with the previous year, that is 1,32. So is the per capita GDP increasing? Answer is yes. Now let's move on to the right hand side also, which is about GDP, per capita GDP, but at current prices. You can see here that current this year's first advance estimate is at 1,97,468, which is, if I compare it with the previous year, it's 1,72,913, and uska previous is at 1,46,087. And I hope with this you have understood that people are definitely well off today as compared to previous year and as compared to 2 years ago. Again, focusing on the number of per capita GDP at current prices of 1,97,468. This is in rupees terms. So in dollars terms, if I were to convert it, I will just divide it by 80. That comes to roughly around $2,500. Well, I hope by now you have very clearly understood what is GDP, how to check it, and what is GDP per capita and how to check it. Okay. But what we did right now is we checked our GDP and we compared it with our own GDP of previous year and our own GDP 2 years ago, right? But now let's compare our GDP with some other countries' GDP. I'm sure you have watched this one specifically where big headlines were made wherein India overtook UK to become the fifth biggest economy. The fifth biggest economy in terms of what? In terms of GDP. Correct? How much was our GDP? 3.5 trillion versus 3.2 trillion. Our animation team was very enthu when I said overtook GDP and this, that. They did that confetti and all that. But wait. When they understand the real picture, then maybe they'll take back that confetti. Now, we are going to focus on GDP per capita. Per person, how much is the GDP? Per person, per capita, if you check, UK is at $47,000 GDP per capita and India is at $2,500 per capita GDP. And if you remember, we did talk about the same number in the table also. But now I hope you have understood we have still a long way to go. Well, I hope with the help of nominal GDP, real GDP, GDP per capita, all these concepts, now you can very well correlate with the pre-bumper when I said it's populated India but a powerful India. So I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, don't forget to share this video with your friends. And if you want to learn about economics more in detail and if you want to learn about the impact of economics on stock market, don't forget to check out our course and you can also avail the coupon code to avail some extra discount. If you want to learn more about Parag Parikh Flexi Cap Fund, click here. And if you want to know more about why did markets crash, you can click here. Till then, take care. Jai Hind and bye-bye.